scariest power striker I've ever seen in the heavyweight division. No one's scarier than Francis.
Up with Ngannou! Goes! Uppercut.
He's done. They bring in guys.
Considered the baddest man on the planet,
Oh, he catches him off guard!
Francis Ngannou destroys everything in his way,
Unleashing thunder from he's out! He's out!
exploits his incredible frame,
Putting in it. Oh, he got hurt!
That's it! That's it!
and imposes his will on whoever he comes across.
Oh!
Today, we look at the physiological traits that make Ngannou's power so devastating,
Over the top!
and why he might be the most dangerous striker we've ever seen. At the peak of his abilities, Francis Ngannou became UFC heavyweight champion of the world after defeating arguably the best heavyweight of all time, Stipe Miocic, in their second matchup.
Nice counter right from Miocic!
He then whipped out the jiu-jitsu against Cyril Gane and rode him to a unanimous decision. After a certain promoter refused to pay up, Ngannou took to boxing and became one of the most feared men in a completely different sport after knocking down and arguably winning a fight against Tyson Fury.
Oh, he catches him off guard!
Let's not talk about this one though.
Can destroy!
Most recently, he's reminded everyone of his dominance by destroying Renan Ferreira in the PFL.
And he is unleashing thunder from he's out!
Francis Ngannou is primarily known for his power, the likes of which we have never seen before in the heavyweight division. He holds an entire compilation of KOs of UFC legends. But how does he generate so much force behind his punches? At its core, punching power follows simple laws. Quick physics lessons. Punching power comes down to how much force you can transfer in the instant of impact. In mechanics, force equals the rate of change of momentum, written as F equal m times delta v over delta t. Notice the position of these terms. Force, mass, and velocity are all on the top of the equation. Therefore, if you increase your mass or your speed, the force increases as a result. That's called proportionality, the idea that each of these variables will proportionally increase or decrease one another. When it comes to heavyweights like Francis, the main thing that changes their punching power is mass. This, however, is just a one-dimensional view of punching power. There are so many other factors that will affect the force that's generated. Before we dive into specifics of what makes Francis so powerful, it's important to understand why thinking about this in a one-dimensional way isn't useful. While genetics accounts for many such things that could affect punching power, the main thing I want to draw your attention to is Francis's frame. He's 6'4", 260 pounds with 83 inches of reach. Here's a graph putting up the current top 15 in the heavyweight division and other legends from the division like Daniel Cormier and Fedor Emelianenko. On the x-axis, or the horizontal axis, we're measuring body weight, and on the y-axis, the vertical axis, we're measuring KO percentage. The main thing to notice is that this line here, which is basically a trend line, shows a positive correlation between the weight of fighters and their KO percentage. In other words, weighing more seems to lead to a higher number of knockouts. Francis sits right about here in the graph. It seems like his KO percentage is quite average for his weight, right? Check out this other graph. We're now comparing reach with the same KO percentages. Again, that line is increasing, and it hints that having longer limbs means you rack up even more KOs. It is, however, important to take this information with a grain of salt. There's a very famous saying in the scientific community that correlation does not mean causation. In other words, it's not necessarily the case that because a fighter has longer limbs, that they will get KOs. This should make intuitive sense, as so much more goes into what makes someone a dangerous knockout artist. For example, when we compare KO percentage represented here in the size of the bubble with both reach and weight, it becomes clear that especially among fighters with a similar frame, he's among one of the best KO artists, so pretty good, right? What I'm simply saying here is that Francis Ngannou has so many genetic advantages that when added together, enable him to have record-breaking power. Let's explore some of the key players related to his frame. A fighter's reach isn't just about having long arms, it's about how far you can extend your striking zone without compromising balance. For Francis, his 83-inch reach on a 6'4" frame is extraordinary, because the rule of thumb is that wingspan should match height approximately. Meaning if you're 6'4", you would expect a wingspan of around 76 inches. His reach is almost 9% more than the expected average for his height cohort. But how would you even get a reach like that? A lot of it actually comes down to genetics. Your limb length is largely determined by your bone structure, something called your skeletal morphology. Studies show that the genes influencing limb to torso proportions are heavily inherited, often involving something called Hox genes, the same developmental genes that tell your body where to build your arms and your legs during embryonic growth. But genetics isn't the whole story. Environment matters too. Wait, no, not this kind of environment. This kind of environment. Things like nutrition during childhood, exposure to physical activity, and even altitude can all subtly influence bone growth and development. So Francis's reach isn't just a genetic lottery ticket, it's also the product of a life shaped by hard physical work and environmental adaptation. Let me take you back for just a second. Do you remember that impulse equation that we had briefly talked about at the beginning of the video? That actual delta t value, which represents the change in time, is decreased when we consider a longer reach. If your punch starts here instead of here, for example, you would expect it to connect in less time, right? Because we know force and delta t are inversely proportional, decreasing the time it takes for a punch to land will actually increase the force that's generated. That's why it's so beneficial to have a longer reach. And if your name happens to be John Jones, you can also blind your opponents. At around 260 pounds of mostly functional mass, Francis doesn't just have bulk, he has optimized mass. Genes linked to muscle development such as ACTN3, often called the speed gene, and MSTN, which is myostatin, influence how much muscle your body builds and how much of that muscle is fast twitch fibers. People with certain variants of ACTN3 will produce more alpha-actinin 3, a protein crucial for explosive, high-velocity movement. Combine that with lower myostatin activity, basically something which normally limits muscle growth, you get an athlete capable of producing enormous force without sacrificing speed. Francis's power doesn't just come from how much he weighs and his likely beneficial gene variants, it's how that weight works for him. While we don't have exact measurements of his muscle or bone density, it's clear from his performance and build that a large portion of his mass is functional tissue, basically the kind that contributes directly to force production. Heavyweight fighters with higher muscle to fat ratios and thicker bone structures tend to generate more torque through the kinetic chain, the system that transfers power from the legs and hips all the way to the fists. Denser bones provide stronger anchor points for muscles, allowing energy to travel more efficiently through the body rather than dissipating as wasted motion. In simple terms, Francis isn't just big, he's efficiently built. His height gives him range, his reach multiplies leverage, and his dense functional frame lets him convert nearly every ounce of mass into forward momentum. That's the hidden reason why when Francis connects, it's time for you to go to sleep. Even with elite genetics, power means nothing if you can't coordinate it through your body at the right moment. This is where Ngannou's neuromuscular efficiency comes in, basically the ability of his nervous system to recruit a massive number of muscle fibers in a fraction of a second. Fighters with higher motor unit recruitment can generate force faster, creating what's known as the rate of force development. Think of it this way, a weaker fighter might throw a punch with 100% effort, but only activate a fraction of their muscle fibers. Francis, on the other hand, can recruit nearly all of his available muscle fibers in an instant. That's what makes his punches look effortless, with catastrophic results. This neuromuscular coordination ties right back to the impulse equation we talked about earlier. His mass will give him that raw potential energy, his velocity, powered by fast twitch fibers and perfect timing, will multiply that force with mass, and his short contact time from his reach and precision will amplify the whole thing. Put it all together and every strike becomes deadly and filled to the brim with CTE-induced power. When you look at a fighter like Ngannou, you're not just seeing a genetic outlier, you're seeing a system where physics, biology, and all skill will align. It's not a fluke, it's the blueprint of a biological anomaly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, don't forget to subscribe, it helps out so much. Thank you and have an awesome day.